So, happy spring. And I'll start the meeting with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'll open the meeting with opportunity for privilege of the floor, and I think Pete Hoyt is signed up.
Thank you. Am I supposed to stand in any particular place?
Yeah, right over there in the regular.
Okay.
The big X on the floor.
Yeah, so I alluded to this at the last meeting, but I'll allude to it again, especially now in light of the money for the consultant having to come up. I believe there's only $4,000 left after you pay the bill tonight, so you guys are gonna have to make a decision real soon. You're gonna keep her on, and, you know, then you gotta get the money from someplace, et cetera, et cetera. And as I urged you last week, why don't you just give it up now? I mean, I think the critter's dead. Maybe the vet hasn't come out yet and certified it, but I think the critter's dead. And you give it up now and save some money and save everybody some grief. And you pursue it for another 6 months or so, and then bury the poor critter. Kind of start to stink by then. I would seriously consider it, and I'm not just trying to be a smart ass. I would really seriously consider it. Now, I know you're squinting your eyes, and it's true. I would seriously consider taking everything into consideration. You can say that you've listened to the people of the town of Caroline is not ready for zoning at this time. And that would be a noble and honorable thing to do to save everybody a lot of trouble. I speak to the two folks on Zoom. I'm sorry if I weren't looking at you guys so much, but speaking to the two of you up there too. Thank you.
I think Andrew Diker is on the list.
So, as our town has been going through this process of examining zoning as a land use tool, I have tried to hold a very firm line with myself toward any sort of public discourse I have had concerning it. That line being to remain reasonable, to not hop up and down. Out of respect for due process, respect for the people working on this, and mostly because I feel being reasonable is something that everybody should hold as a goal in general. I feel like I have held that line. I have asked for things like public posting of supporting data that zoning will have some efficiency towards stated goals, and frank, honest public discussion by the town board on the merits or lack thereof of zoning as a policy tool in general. Both seem reasonable to me for a constituent to ask, and were summarily ignored by everyone but Catherine. Anyway, point being, thus far, I feel like I have held the line of being reasonable, logical, and rational, but holding this line for myself comes with the expectation that it should be held by all. And for me at least, the line of reason was undeniably crossed at the April 26th Zoning Commission meeting with the rhetoric around mining in the town. Ironically enough, my issue is not even with the subject matter itself, but rather what it shows for the whole process. I agree that large-scale mining should have regulation, and as it is dubbed in the meeting, tiny mines should not. That's the way it is in New York State right now, and should continue to be that way. What I cannot condone, and crosses the line of reason for me, is the absolute absurdity that a group of civilian volunteers with no background, experience, or expertise in the field of mining are looking at redefining mining for the town and its regulation for our town in ways above and beyond what is deemed necessary or appropriate for New York State, armed with nothing other than personal opinions and good intentions. And this seems to be somehow viewed as acceptable. And beyond that is the issue that the whole process is based in the context of blanket restriction, which no matter what the subject at hand is a profoundly flawed and ineffectual way to achieve anything, let alone an issue as complex and nuanced as land regulation or land preservation, where no matter the time and effort you put in, you will never be able to take into account or consider all the variables and circumstances, what you ultimately end up with is a group of people who know nothing about mining, talking about how to structure mining regulation based on nothing but their own opinion, with, of course, the catch-all variance board later to deal with the inevitable discrepancies based on their own opinion. And that is profoundly wrong. At this point, to remain silent would be continuing to participate in an unspoken agreement we are holding with ourselves that the process we're engaged in is still within the bounds of anything that could be determined even remotely reasonable. I won't do it. This is not reasonable. And we are venturing so far past absurdity, it is no longer even humorous. Are we so drunk on our own pedanticism that we can honestly continue to tell ourselves this narrative that we are working toward anything productive? For the love of all that is good, the tiny minds, honestly, what are we doing here? That the counterproductivity and fecklessness of how we are going about this is not abundantly clear to any person possessed of a complete forebrain, and that they would then have recognized this, not feel compelled to rectify this train wreck is inconceivable. I'm going to finish by repeating a prior request. For the town board to at the very least start by having an open, honest, objective discourse that is public but contained within itself as a group, meaning not public engagement per se, but at least a public meeting, about the efficiency and validity of zoning as a tool in pursuit of stated goals. Following due process, that should have happened before even the formation of the zoning commission. And that can be chalked down to oversight. But at this point, the stock response of we're waiting for the zoning commission to finish its work goes beyond oversight into the realm of abject negligence.
Can we have a copy of your, make sure that it's...
You, Cal, may have this copy.
Thank you.
And I'll call on Tim Wetzel next. If anybody in Zoom wishes to speak, and they should raise their hand, their Zoom hand. But go ahead, Kim.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. Although I get the feeling that looking at the number of board members that are present and those who seek to stay home and not participate in this process, however remotely, it's a shame. It's really a shame. This is a big item for a lot of residents in the town of Caroline. Now, mining permits. You're spending some time on mining and that sort of thing. I am perhaps, and I believe that I am the only resident in the town of Caroline that owns a current mining permit, both federal and state. It's very, very regulated. For the town to be spending time and our money to have some expert help us through this process has to do with mining, of which I would dare you to say they know nothing about. We do have a mine in operation in the town of Caroline, and it's been in operation since the time when many of us were very small children. So, that's the mining issue. I think that the town board and certain members of the town board basically are hiding behind this virus thing. I understand. You can get inoculated if you're so inclined. I got my final shot today, okay, because I happen to be of an age where I may be susceptible. And so I'm trying to take reasonable precautions. And I encourage other people that, unless you've got a real thing about vaccinations, to do the same. The problem that I see is there aren't any provisions in this proposed things for certain activities of which I have and which I operate in. There's not a definitive way to regulate my businesses that are located in the town of Caroline. and which generate a reasonable amount of money for the town of Caroline, in that half of the sales tax that I generate through my businesses, plural, of which there are 3, comes back to the town of Caroline. The other side of that is that there are certain things that you can have, and you're talking about gravel pit. You are permitted to remove 1,000 tons of gravel in the state of New York, in the town of Caroline, okay, with no permit on an annual basis. And for the town to be spending time and money contemplating to regulate that, no. If you want to regulate some things, take a look at some of your current regulations you have in place and go about enforcing some of those. This is really where you need to put your effort. A lot of people have addressed this. We've had a lot of public demonstrations about it, and yet you people are just hiding behind the thing, well, we're not really going to discuss it, we're just going to listen. But somehow, I get the idea that maybe you're not listening. The fact that we've got 3 town board members here and others that are who knows where. If they have an outhouse, they might have a TV or there that they can participate there. They can be doing whatever. I would like to see those members that are doing this from afar to come here and talk to the folks. Listen to the folks. Hear what they're saying. Because I think this town board has made a concerted effort to just placate us. Yeah, it's okay. Be a good kid, go sit down, be quiet. So to that end, I want you to take a good look at this zoning thing and be a little more receptive of the people that are quite concerned about it. I, being a significant landowner, and it figures very prominently in my retirement, and as somebody that turned 79, you know, I'm looking at retirement down the road. So I'd like to think that all the plans that I've made, the things I might like to do with my property, which I've been diligently paying taxes on for the last 45 years, that I might be able to do it. And yet, what little things I look at about the property, I'm going to be denied that. So I really think that you, the town board, and you, the members that are not present here that could be, okay, are just kind of shuffling this thing off. And I fully expect, because you're advertising for a zoning officer, hell, we haven't even put it in place yet. Why are we soliciting? Why are you interviewing people for a position that you don't even know it has? Because I think there may be some things that have been predetermined. And I think some of the board members that are present, some of the board members that may be participating in this thing by video, they really don't want to face the music. They ought to be here talking to the folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I will offer the clarification. We are looking for a code officer. We're looking for a code officer under the same title that we've held for the last 3 code officers. And so, if anybody's interested. No, sorry. I just wanted to respond to that.
Yeah.
So,
But you use the term zoning officer.
that's
Take
civil service description. It's in there. So we do not have zoning at this point, but the code officer needs to be able to administer our local laws that pertain to land use and our stormwater law. So those are outside of the New York State Building Code.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
And all previous code officers have the same title, you might want to show.
Okay, good. I did mean to say that. Yes, thank you for that
Mark,
clarification. Tim, go ahead.
could I make a clarification, just an explanation about what appears to be a confusion regarding regulating mining? The zoning commission was approached by the company that is currently running the mine at the end of Brookendale, which was concerned because of the definitions that are being worked on by the zoning commission in the draft of the zoning law. Mining was not there. They requested that mining be included in those definitions for the purposes of potential future use. Those definitions are simply a definition of what mining is. There's there's no reference to the regulation of mining, other than perhaps there might be some reference to state law, but the zoning does not regulate mining, and that is not the intent of the zoning commission. I just wanted to clarify that, because that seems to be an issue that Andrew raised, and it came up again. I understand if there's concern about this, but I hope that this helps resolve that confusion.
Tim, I would just add to that, any concerns about the discussion around mining, that would be feedback for the zoning commission. So they're actively working on that, nothing's resolved, so that would be appreciated.
Where does the camel?
Goodbye. I'm leaving.
I would say, I was at the meeting when the zoning commission talked about
Point
that.
of order.
And
Point
it
of
was
order.
talked about.
Point of
He's
order.
lying.
Point of order, you're out of order.
Thank you. He's lying. He's out of order.
That's all.
When,
Kim had a question.
yes. When are we gonna seriously take into consideration the nose of the camel under the edge of the tent? This is what I see going on. There's nobody here that's concerned about the nose of the camel being under the tent. Next thing you know, Mr. Camel's gonna be in there,
So what?
trying to make the people cognizant of those facts.
Can I make a point of clarification around the point of clarification?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, I hear what Tim is saying. However, I also want to just bring it back to what the conversation was. The concern is not about what I'm hearing, I could be wrong, what I'm hearing and what I'm reflecting back is that the concern is about the process of the discussion that ensued with the zoning commission. It was not about the addition of that into the use table. We don't need to discuss it any further, but I don't think that was what was being stated.
That's why I offered that any feedback about the particulars of their discussion would appropriately be sent to the zoning commission and appreciated and should.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, great. Does anyone else wish to address the board at this time? All right, close privilege. Great. Thank you. I will move on to the supervisor's report. Regarding the zoning initiative, the zoning planning expenditures to community planning and environmental associates to date are $30,666.51. The zoning commission has enlisted our planning consultant for more services than originally proposed by the consultant at $34,875. So I recommend that the zoning commission continue to use the services of the consultant on an as-need basis within the 2022 budget for planning, which we did budget for. An update on Ecruz Road that we've been grappling with for several years. So there's a culvert there that fell apart a few years ago and a replacement was put in. So, and we received a grant to do that project, so we're trying to work out the particulars of that grant to meet the specifications or the requirements of the grant. So Superintendent Spencer and Deputy Superintendent Guggenheim and I met with the DVC and Army Corps of Engineers at Ecruz Road recently to discuss the project, and I think there was general agreement that given the site conditions and the greatly improved capacity of the installed culvert, modifications to stream bed and bank to stabilize the stream and enhance passage of aquatic organisms through the culvert would be the best use of the WQIP grant money without installation of additional culvert. So that we're working on moving that forward pronto. Energy Independent Caroline, our energy volunteer committee, met last month with my NYSERDA's Clean Energy Coordinator, Regina Cassidy, and she was updating us on community choice aggregation, which is a group purchasing model that's being developed, and the lead is being taken by the city and town of Ithaca. And it would allow a community to purchase energy with, that meets whatever specifications, so you can purchase the energy based on getting the lowest price, getting a lower price and having that being renewable energy, or all of those and supporting local renewable energy projects. So anyway, she discussed that with us, and we'll be continuing to, EIC will be continuing to follow that, to learn more about it and to advise the town board and inform the community. This is an opt-out model, so anyone has the ability to opt out of it and maintain their current energy supplier. This building, the historic town hall, Councilman Snow and I met with Steve Gideon to examine conditions here in order to consider measures to mitigate stormwater impacts on the foundation and the siding, and discussed regrading the perimeter and guttering, and so we will be considering a resolution tonight to engage Steve. He has experience with historic structures and is a trained architect. The TPA Emergency Services Planning Subcommittee that I'm chairing continues to work on addressing personnel and fiscal strains on emergency services. And the state funding model proposed by Mayor Hart of Trumansburg is now being considered at the state level. And we are considering county level rapid response in our discussions, which paramedics would respond to stabilize the situation before an ambulance could arrive. So this has been done in several other counties, and so something to consider. Trail planning. We have long been engaged with consideration of or work towards extending the South Hill Recreation Way Trail. So continuing that work with partner towns and NYSEG on an agreement to extend that trail on the NYSEG property. And on a minor note, Cal took the initiative to submit water tests for the town hall to the Community Science Institute, and those came back the other day and were negative for E. coli and coliform. So that was nice. And I met recently, finally, with the consultants developing the City of Ithaca's drinking water source protection plan. And we discussed potential measures that could be implemented to, in Caroline, to protect the drinking water in Ithaca. Our water flows that direction and provides drinking water for the city and town of Ithaca. And so that's under development, and we're looking at implementation measures. There was a representative there from the city of Ithaca who spoke of the possibility of providing assistance with grant writing and sharing of equipment. So that was pretty cool. So that's my report. Any questions? Great. So with that, I'll town clerk's report.
All right, I'll quickly give you the collection report for April. Clerk's office collected 19 dog licenses, 8 building permit application and fees, 2 fishing licenses, 1 impoundment fee, 1 marriage transcript, and the total revenue was $1,087, less the New York State fees. Check 272 in the amount of $1,011.76 was given to the supervisor on May 3rd. And just to let the board know that I received 4 FOIL requests in the last 30 days, all of which have been completed.
Great.
Thanks, that's it.
Thank you, Jesse.
Just
Question?
on the building permits, is it easy to have a breakdown if they're just additions or new, whole new residences?
I'm gonna be working with Steve to try to get, he's done everything in Danby, so
Yeah.
nothing's been inputted into the BIS system in the code office, so we're gonna work on him giving us a report, and then Velvet and I are gonna work on getting that into the software so that we can print a report on that stuff in
That'd be great.
the last
Thank
6
you.
months, yeah.
Great, thanks, Jess. Highway Superintendent's report.
It's not too long. You already mentioned Heathcliff Road. We had jump cleanup. This year worked out pretty good. Jump cleanup cost us about $86. That was the cost difference between the garbage and the scrap. So we just about broke even. We're lining up some spring work. Next week will be surface treating. And we're also in the process of lining up some emergency work on Buffalo Road. The Buffalo Road project will happen pretty soon again. The stream bank has sloughed off into the creek and is now affecting the road. So that's kind of a big priority at the moment. That was it for my report. But I do have a question, since you brought it up, and it involves the trail. But I'd like to take the opportunity now to ask the board how they see the trail affecting the Town of Caroline Highway Department. It's a question I asked shy of 3 years ago, and I haven't got an answer. So if we're back onto the topic of the trail, I guess I'd like to take the opportunity to just ask everybody how they envision that affecting.
I don't know the details yet, but we are working with the other towns, and there will likely be cooperative arrangements for trail maintenance. So that's my expectation. I haven't discussed anything for commitment of the Highway Department in Caroline.
So
But they're making done, right?
They're right.
I mean,
concerns many years ago, and that question was answered about how other trails are taking care of minimal trails. Bobby, you wanted to look at that, but again, each trail is different, and so that would be in the future I would think about, but it will give you some information if you're looking for it.
Thank you, Kate. So are you talking about the trails report, Kate?
Yes, the questions that were asked at the Trails Committee, I believe in 2008, was answered in quite a bit of detail.
So we have a binder in the town hall, and I think it's also posted on the trail page on the town website. Also.
I think that's it for me. I think we'll have some other discussion about some other topics later, but that's it for the report.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Roy Butler, our assistant code officer, is here.
Okay, can I just stand here or?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay, I'm gonna stand here, I'm going to take this off. My name is Brian Butler, I'm happy to be here tonight. I apologize for not being here last month's meeting. Here I had a rather flowery introduction, but I wasn't able to take part in that. I am an interim or acting code officer for special projects. I don't know if you've heard about that in the past, but Steve Courtright is your temporary code officer by title, you might say, and is taking care of the day-to-day duties in the town. I came on board to do special projects. I do that for various municipalities around central New York, basically to take some of the busy activities off your standard code officer. And I also realize in talking with Mark that they're actively involved in interviewing for permanent code officers, which I understand, being involved in code enforcement as well as architecture since 2004, that the number of code officers that even sign up to take a job are dwindling seriously. A lot of them retired. Not the job you necessarily want to take if you want to build friendships and close long-term relationships, but it is a necessary job all the same. So anyways, I'm involved in some special projects in the town of Caroline. Most of them were, at least began as open projects that were never closed out. Thus, they never had a final inspection. Those of you that have had projects in the past or just are aware of the town's activities in that realize that there was sort of an open door of code officers here over the last few years. And that doesn't help for any municipality nor for the community at large, because when code officers leave, sometimes they leave before a project can be closed out. In other cases, maybe there was some ambiguity and a project was just coming online when they left. At any rate, so that's one of my responsibilities. And the other have been more complicated projects where there has been some, we'll call it unlawful construction during the moratorium, which have to be addressed in a singular fashion because, and I'm not speaking yea or nay against your slow pursuit toward zoning or anything else, but really it is very common that a community, when they're seeking something of that nature, will put a moratorium on construction until they can sort out where they really expect and need to go. Just as a little aside, I'm a resident in Freeville. When I first moved into the village back in 1980, I realized there was a 6.5-year long moratorium on any construction in the village. Had nothing whatsoever to do with zoning. Had to do with the fact that every residence in Freeville was on its own private septic system, and it had so saturated the ground that it was leaching into Fall Creek. And therefore, no more construction by the health department was permitted until the village voted on, which was a bitter pill, they voted on putting sewers in throughout the village. And after that, over a period of time, it cleared up, and then the moratorium was lifted. Having talked with some of the residents of Caroline and that, I wanted to clear up that misconception that having a moratorium on construction is not merely a tool for impending zoning. It basically can have any number of factors leading up to why a community feels the need to put a moratorium on construction. So at any rate, I'm not going to go into specific projects today, but I want to let you know that these special projects are moving along sometimes on a little slower pace than you would see a standard project, like a house getting an application for a building permit and then going forward from there. These are problem projects for various reasons. I'm doing my best to contact the owners of these projects, and I have committed to working with them the best I can, as long as they're willing to work with me. I'm not the kind that comes in with a heavy hand, unless they show a heavy hand toward me, and then I have the basically the strength of the law on my side. And that has to be empowered at that point, because the law is for everybody to be equally enforced under. Any questions that you have before I sit down? I know this is my first time when people don't usually ask for questions of the community, but
Thank you.
I got a question. I mean, that was a very good presentation you made, Brian, but I think we all know which troublesome project you're referring to. There's a perception that you were brought in by the town board. People use the term headhunter, I don't know how to use that, but brought in more as kind of a hatchet man, because previous code officers didn't want to do what the supervisor was asking them to do. I'm just wondering if you would address that, please.
other than the fact that these previous projects are left open, or in one case were prematurely closed out, I have very little involvement with Mr. Whitmer, and to be honest with you, when I took this position, I did not expect it to be a long-term position. Whatever it took to finish my responsibilities up, what I felt it necessary to have the authority, if you want to say, to do the job that I'm hired to do. And I don't necessarily Look forward to working on anybody's wish list that comes from the board or the supervisor or the mayor or whatever else. The law is the law. Interestingly enough, it's a little unique here because even though most of the communities that I've worked for in the past do already have zoning in place, what will often happen in smaller municipalities, and I would say this one will be no exception, that when they hire a code enforcement office that has been certified by the state of New York, they will also ask that individual to enforce the local zoning regulation, whatever it may be. Now, you've already got land use regulations, you've got subdivision regulation, right now you've got the moratorium. They're all land use regulations, they just don't have the term zoning put before them. And those will be enforced, the projects that are under my responsibility, those additional regulations will be enforced by me. But no, I don't have any specific mission or agenda on what I'm to do, other than to make sure that I will try to work with the people that I can. But if they ghost me, or if they run to their attorneys and say, we don't want to work with you, then I wait for a short period of time to find out what their attorneys have to say and work with them. I will say, in all honesty, over the years that I've been involved, is that there are relatively few attorneys that will come back to me and they will mount a serious defense on behalf of their clients against the New York State Code and the state of New York or other specific land use regulations that are pretty much cast in stone and are clear. Now, once in a while, there are land use regulations that are vague, and that's where the attorneys make their money. Unfortunately, neither the town nor the clients usually win in that case, just the attorneys do. But you know, I'm waiting back for a couple of calls now from attorneys relative to some projects in the town of Caroline. And when I pick up the phone, I'm going to listen to their pitch with honesty and try and look at their point of view as well as what my point of view is cast initially either to the client, or in some cases I've already written letters directly to the attorneys. And also have had the blessing of Mr. Crow, that he realizes that what I'm doing is in keeping with my responsibility as and there's a term that you may or may not have ever heard, but it will become something that's pretty regular to you, I hope. It's called the authority having jurisdiction. That's not my title, it'd be too long to fit on a card anyways. But what it is that the state of New York, because this is a home rule state, will convey the New York State Building Code. And they will ask municipalities, be it a county, a town, or even a village in New York State, that's the smallest entity that can incorporate this. They will ask them, do you want to be the authority having jurisdiction to enforce this code that we mandate? If not, we jump up to the next highest level, and then the next highest level. The enforcement will always be there, but you won't necessarily, when I say you, it's a collective thing, but the local municipality won't necessarily be able to go down on a Tuesday and talk to the local building code officer if the state has had to adapt to the enforcement by themselves. They may only be once a month somebody coming through here for 4 hours. So the fact that most municipalities are willing to put on their books even a part-time code officer that may not be here any more than 4 or 6 hours a week, that level of enforcement is much more responsive to the community than having somebody from Albany come down here and say, yeah, you can do that, or no, it's not the way the law reads.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
We need to move on here. Yep. No, thanks. Thanks so much, Brian.
On violations of the building code. Is it fines, is it?
There can be fines. Now, the one thing that's important is the fact that when you have a building code and an individual chooses to appeal that, unlike in zoning, which is truly a local law, that the appeal has to go before the state of New York. And it's very seldom overturned, but it goes, Usually in this area, it goes to Syracuse, and if it can't be resolved there, it goes to Albany. It's a state law, and the local municipality does not have the authority to counteract state law.
Good.
Yep.
Great, thank you, Brian. Yep.
Just a quick question, but who deems the project to be a special project? And then what's the criteria to be a special project compared to a regular project that Steve would do?
So Steve is handling the regular building applications and process of inspections and all that. So the special projects were ones that were either sort of antiquated and unresolved or had gone off the tracks. And so Brian was brought in, actually at Kevin McMahon's recommendation, to help us with this.
So I guess my question is, like, in the meantime, until we have a regular full-time code officer, there's some things that have come up that are not necessarily on the life-threatening side, but we've got mailboxes that are thrown up with homemade addresses. The concern there is through fire and EMS. If that address doesn't exist, nobody knows where they're going. So is that considered a special project, or? I mean, is that something Steve can take care of, or is that something I should?
Yeah, I think we should talk about it, but I think that's something Steve might be able to help with, so, but yeah.
I had a couple other questions, but they're more legal. Is it better if I just try to talk to Mr. Crowe?
Yeah, I would prefer that.
Okay.
Super helpful that you're here.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. County representatives report, he emailed it to us today, he couldn't be here tonight. He reported on the county budget process, and they've set a goal of a 1.9% increase in the tax levy, but that's a work in progress, and I think he's hoping that it'll be less, as he explained. And the county's passing a resolution authorizing the county to exceed the tax cap. And this is something that municipalities need to do. It's a precautionary measure, so that if you do exceed the tax cap, you're not penalized, or that you're able to do that. So, and he also reports that he would be, and he did participate in the Board of Assessment review that was held in this room this afternoon at 36 p.m.
And I was involved in that too. We had 3 individuals came and appealed, briefed their assessment on 4 properties. 2 were residential and 2 were apartment buildings. And we made our recommendations and passed them on to the county Board of Assessment.
Great.
And they will make a final determination.
Thanks, Scott. Do the grievers then go meet with assessment as well with more information?
One person requested in-person inspection of the property rather than just drive by. Another person just needed to provide some more financial data for commercial operations. And another one was just about, they had an independent assessment review. And, there was some question about the time, because it needs to be at least within the last 2 years. It's fairly straightforward.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. So that's a brief summary of Dan's report. So move on to the age-friendly communities report that I believe Will is going to give us.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just sit? Or do you want me over there? Or?
That's fine, Will, if you said.
Okay.
Okay.
We can hear.
Okay.
Okay, great. So, there's, I think of it as 2 levels of age-friendly. There's the county project level, where I was telling you previously, they're working on their second 5-year plan. And along those lines, they're still taking comments on their draft plan. And I have been under the impression that a specific board member is dealing with youth, and there's a large section of that 5-year plan that addresses youth. But maybe I'm mistaken, because I didn't get any response. So can you tell me who on the town board is like a youth program liaison?
That's me. Hello, back over here. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I did go to one meeting. I'm sorry I didn't respond to your email immediately.
Okay, so you got the email, and
I did.
can you respond sometime soon?
I will respond tonight. How about that?
Okay. Just
Okay.
suggest a date and time. That would be helpful. Date and time for me to bring you up to date on what's happening, and we can discuss it.
Yes, I would like to talk with you in person about things.
Okay.
We could set up time for that. Good.
Okay, thank you. And are you doing broadband, or Mark, are you doing broadband?
Well, we're both doing it, but Kate has taken that on as a chairman,
Okay.
chairpersonship, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Okay, so along the lines of what's happening at the county level, along with the draft 5-year plan, a link to a study done by Dr. Warner was attached. I owe you the link to that, Mark, and I think...
I sent it, so everyone has it. That's what I sent.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So everybody on the,
Everyone
thank you.
has received that. Yeah.
Okay, good, because that's where I was headed with that. But just to maybe whet your appetite to read it, the findings on that were it's just a 1-paragraph summary. They find that what's called nodal development, which is really typical for zoning models, as an age-friendly development strategy, leaves much of the community unserved. This was the findings of Dr. Warner's group, and they had done a study of all the comprehensive plans for Tompkins County last year. So they're very familiar with Tompkins County, and they also did a study on the interaction of social agencies in Tompkins County and responding during COVID to getting food out to people who needed food deliveries. So in the context of those studies, they felt that cross-agency collaboration brings built environment planning, service delivery, social engagement together to promote attention to health across rural and urban communities. We find giving attention to service provision and civic engagement is as important as built environment in building a healthy place, especially in rural communities. So the takeaway for practice, I'm just reading verbatim what's in the report. Planners need to move beyond a primary focus on the physical built environment and give comprehensive attention to service provision and civic participation to build a healthy community. Strategies include encouraging different community stakeholders to participate in the planning process, improving delivery services for the rural community, and promoting cross-agency collaboration. And, you know, I realize that that's directly touches the hot button issue right now, but I think it makes it all the more important for town board members to at least give it a look over if you could. They do emphasize that if you have the social infrastructure and the community participation, your community will have generally better health despite any lack of physical environment controls, which is usually the focus of planning processes. So it's it's an academic report, but it's got a lot of great ideas. It references other people's studies. They're not a lone voice in the wilderness there, but they are part of a new trend. And I think since if you're looking at zoning, you may as well not, go with the old models that are just going to be, that in the future you might be advised to drop or modify because planners are starting to look at planning differently than they have in the past 30, 40 years. So I think Dr. Winter's a good source.
We learn from our mistakes, what I'm hearing you saying.
Well, development is different now than it was 40 years ago. And we're in a different place in so many ways. And so the emphasis on social environment and civic participation, I think a lot of people have picked that up, not just in planning.
That would be complementary to
Yes.
other things, right?
Yeah, that would be the idea, and the thought behind it is here we are in rural communities where things get done because of volunteers and people who don't get paid the big bucks, but are doing the same heavy load to make the town run. And if you are so dependent on volunteers, you want to, have good community identity so that you have a good level of participation for volunteers, which,
That's
as
the
you
way to
know,
build participation, right?
yes, that's the idea. And especially with all the EMS and emergency preparedness, that really brings it to the fore. So they're also working youth into that. So, yeah, thinking that a more involved youth in your community will lead to more people sticking around. That would be nice for the rest of us who are too old to be young anymore.
Don't be here when we're not here.
One would hope, yeah. Okay, and then on the community level, we're at square one, and we're basically two in number with lots of contacts, and that would be Beth and myself. And we were both heavily involved with the county efforts, still are, but we want to do the age-friendly with our own projects for the local level. So we're going to start out marketing the concept as a way to just start publicizing that, hey, there's this way of looking at your community, and hop on board with us. In the meantime, I think the county is going to address the Council of Governments, if they haven't already, about the county plan. It's a plan. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and if anyone would like a copy of the draft plan, I can forward that too, and I promise this time it won't take 2 months to do that.
Happy to have it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Forward. Yeah.
that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Yep.
Any other questions for Will? All right, thank you very much. Any updates from liaisons or committees?
Ag met last week and actually has a very simple and actionable ask, which I'm glad Bobby's here because I think you're the, I don't know how signage works. I'm sure, are you the conduit to signs?
Depending where, but I
So-
can point you in the right direction.
It occurs to us that we, although we are a right to farm community, do not have signage to indicate we are a right to farm community. Like many towns, you know, if you drive through, it'll say, you know, welcome to Dryden, a right to farm community. So I am really hoping to push this like as quickly as possible. It seems a pretty simple thing, but perhaps I misunderstand if there's some other process. I don't know if I introduce this by resolution or how this works, but I wanted to definitely give voice to this as like a easy ask from our meeting. Is it?
I think it's probably, you have to make a few phone calls,
Okay.
because it's probably where you would want those, it's probably a state road
At the town lines, yeah.
at the town lines or a county road, you know, coming into town. Because most of the, I'd say like back roads where the town line is, there's nothing other than a sign that says Caroline Town Line.
Yeah.
Not that we couldn't get some of those and put them on our own poles.
Right.
We could do something like that.
Okay.
But if you're looking for the bigger one,
The big, like, you know, like definitely like 79, I know it's obviously not a
right,
town
so
road.
we'd have to get in contact with the state and
Okay,
put a request for a sign.
okay. I will stop by. I'll do whatever.
Yeah.
Do whatever it takes. But the point was to really, you know, emphasize the presence of support of ag in the community, and it's one of those things that seems like we should have.
And signage near active farms or just more at the perimeters?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there's the general question of like other signage to indicate active farming, which might relate to like what Kate was talking about, you know, road safety and speed and things. But I guess the initial thing was the specific right to farm,
Just get
you
that
know,
at the borders.
yeah, with the town line, like, welcome to Caroline, the right to farm community. But yeah, that's also a good point, because the other thing that has come up is farm, you know, interface with non-farm road.
But there's just the right to farming, because you see the sign with the guy on the tractor with a hat, and I sometimes question how effective those are.
Right. I think driving, like if you drive past, if you go on Midline Road, basically, where we leave Caroline, that's a good example. I think it just says like, drive, like a right to farm community. So I don't know if that's a state sign or a
That's a
county
county
sign or what that is.
County.
Okay, right. That's what I've got.
Signage.
I'm really excited about the sign. Yes.
Anyone else? Move on.
Where are we on street lights with the glare shields?
We're still waiting to hear back from the contractor.
Okay,
So we're still waiting to hear back on the training as well.
okay. We'll keep waiting and I'll keep asking.
I think, you know, it's going to be helpful to, you know, get to that point, and so then we can, you know, garner feedback.
Yep.
From the community as a whole. Great, thank you. All right, so.
Mark,
Tim.
so you just mentioned that the zoning commission's next meeting is Tuesday, May 24th, I believe it is, at 7:15. I'm hopeful, having witnessed the last meeting, that that the zoning commission should be in a position, I believe, by the end of that meeting or soon thereafter, to share with the public its current revisions of the law up to, I believe it's section, through section, I believe it's 4, up to the site plan review law. And with the aim of then having a public information session sometime probably later in June to allow for adequate communication between that time.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Tim. Anything else? Okay, move on to our discussion topics. So discussion of the highway barn land. So I put that on there we were thinking of, in my last discussion with John, is that we would reconstitute or refurbish the highway barn committee once we had the first site selection part done and move on from there and put out an RFP. And but I think it occurred to me that we haven't done that part of reconstituting the committee. So I would advocate that we do that.
Or what about just adding it to the capital planning committee's work, because equipment and storage and the highway facility, they're just so intertwined. Storage and the building we have to work in is so much a part of the life cycle cost of a piece of equipment and its resale value at the end of its our use of it. And so, what we have is, for maintenance and upkeep and what's needed in the amount of storage. So you can't separate out equipment from the building, it seems, from our initial discussions.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think that I'm wondering if we don't want to keep those separate given the complexity of both items. I mean, I'm concerned that to move forward with the highway barn is really going to require laser focus on that particular issue and all of the complexities. And taking into consideration what items would be stored in it is a separate issue than building inventories and planning to buy new equipment. So they're parallel, but I would recommend that we keep them separate. I also thought, Mark, that we had decided that it might be helpful for the entire board to stay involved in the development of the highway barn from this time on, instead of farming it out piecemeal, but I don't know what everybody thinks about that.
Can someone help me understand what the highway committee did? What did the highway committee do before?
That was John's committee, John Frazier's committee, and so they they stewarded the site selection process with LaBerge, contracting with LaBerge for that whole process. So that's really it in a nutshell.
And who was on that?
That was John.
It was John,
Bob,
myself,
Cal.
Yeah.
Ed Kirkland was on there.
Okay.
Did he drop off after a while?
No, COVID hit. I mean, that's really when we were doing things from the computer. Milton Tam was on there for a very short time.
I mean, once we put out the RFP and got LaBerge, I mean, they were the
Right, then LaBerge took it and did what they did.
They were the professional consultant, engineers, recommenders. So,
But I guess if I could add to Cal's statement, for those of us that are on the capital planning committee, 3/4 of us we're on the old building committee. And I don't know about you, but if we can take one meeting and start tying all this stuff together, it would be a lot easier. This next part, will take the knowledge of more than just picking out a site. Needs to be people, I get what Tim is saying, but the majority of everybody that sits on the board doesn't know what it takes, or the space it takes for a highway barn, or it takes for equipment, or any of that. That's where it ties back into the capital equipment, is the people that are on that are extremely equipment oriented, extremely repair shop oriented. Barry's also on that committee. Barry has knowledge in everything, so it's a pretty well-rounded group. So
Who's on the capital?
It's more than well done.
It's the three of you plus Barry.
It's Bob Spencer, Cal Snow, Barry Goodrich, Kenny Hammond, and Todd Schmidt. Todd Schmidt is an economics professor at Cornell. Kenny Hammond is a long-term mechanic in the town. He worked for Chris Bell Automotive, and now he works for Clemens. One of the finest mechanics in central New York. Who was a highway superintendent. There's me and then Barry Goodrich, who knows, stormwater. And when it comes to roads and capital equipment, stormwater and ditches it's not just about roads. Rain that falls on these roads, runs off the ditches and the creeks and, the things that Bob's up against right now.
Right.
So and it's just, our meetings have just been, I really feel excited that we've got a group